Good. Yeah, it's week 107 of our weekly discussions, and today we're talking about just recent PR crises in EA. I'm going to talk about some of these, but not all of them that you might be familiar with, and then hopefully we can parse out in the breakout discussions afterwards what we think about these, what we should do, especially as Christians. But first, what is EA? Here I'm talking about two distinct things, although they're oftentimes conflated to be one thing. So I'm talking about this idea, first of all, to maximize the good you can do through your career, your projects, and your donations. And second, I'm talking about this community or this movement of many individuals and organizations who care about this idea and who gather around it. So a lot of these crises today are going to involve the movement or the community and things affecting individuals or institutions within this movement. We'll look at these crises. Then I want to just share just a reminder of some resources that we have here at EA for Christians before mentioning some discussion questions that might guide our breakout discussion. Good. So the first, I'm going to list 4 crises, each with respectively like an article that goes into depth about this. And I'm going to do a very shallow overview of each of these. Of course, we could talk a lot about each of these, and I think some of you on this call know a lot more about it than I do. And I don't want to like misquote any of these, especially when some of the allegations are pretty heavy in some cases. So starting out with the Time article, there's this Time article that came out, I think a couple weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago now. And the title, Effective Altruism Has a Hostile Culture for Women, critics say. And it traces the story of a few women who, by their own accounts, were actively involved in effective altruism, especially in the Bay Area. They considered themselves effective altruists, and they were pretty deep in effective altruism subcommunities. So they were in group houses with effective altruists, and they were participating in like subcultures on many levels. So not only would they work at organizations that were involved with effective altruism, but there was also an incredible amount of social networks and friend groups where everybody was an effective altruist, and there was also dynamics of power within these friend groups over who had controls over the social, the housing, the group housing, and oftentimes there were relationships, romantic relationships in these friend groups, and including polyamorous relationships, and there was just quite a lot going on here. And the allegations in the article is that a lot of these relationships had dynamics that privileged men in power who held a lot of social power, also a lot of professional power, and these weren't oftentimes delineated very clearly, exactly clear barriers between personal and professional life. And the result is that allegedly many people were very hurt, and this is something that has drawn a lot of attention. This is quite a big deal that this made into a Time magazine. I think the article alleges several dozen cases where women, I think primarily women, brought complaints about sexual misconduct, and many of these made their way to CEA, and CEA has had some responses to this. I know Juliet Wise is quoted in the article about what CEA has been thinking and doing in response to this. But the situation has become very messy, and people have been deeply hurt. So this is one crisis that EA has faced lately. A second crisis that EA has faced lately is this crisis with a philosopher, Nick Bostrom, who is the co-founder of the Future of Humanity Institute, which is attached to Oxford University. Bostrom also wrote that very popular EA book called Superintelligence, and is part of this EA movement that is especially focused on rationalism and also more of the futuristic or futurist aspirations of the movement. And it came to surface that he had written on this internet blog long ago, I think something like 20 years ago, something like that. And this was some kind of blog newsletter of rationalists, and Bostrom, you can read the account exactly what he wrote, but he wrote some account relating to very controversial descriptions of IQ and intelligence, including the hereditability of this, and this differing based on race, and also had a few lines that many people found very disturbing. And you can go to this article on the Daily Beast and read exactly what he said. But given Bostrom's prominence within the broader effective altruism movement and his influence on many thinkers who we might consider to be some of the thought leaders of the movement, some might even consider him one of the thought leaders, this was a pretty shocking thing to come to the surface, especially, yeah, I mean, I encourage you to read the article and come to your own opinions, but this is another recent PR crisis. So another recent crisis would be, I think this is Emergent Ventures' purchase of Wytham Abbey. So this is somewhat related to CEA. The CEA that we more publicly know is the group that organizes a lot of central EA events like the EA Globals and so forth. But the details are described in an EA forum post that I would encourage you to look further into. But anyways, this group associated with effective altruism in effective altruism movement building at a very centralized level purchased this historic estate called Wytham Abbey in the UK. I think this is just outside of Oxford, and past residents included Elizabeth I and Oliver Cromwell, and just many affluent individuals. And the purchase of this very affluent mansion by effective altruists who famously began as individuals who wanted to donate large chunks of their money to charity. This seemed a bit like a double standard. I like some of these memes, like the CEA pushing the camel through the needle meme. And I think there's some strong Christian repulsion to this idea as well. Gaining wealth and affluence as a means of doing good, it seems a bit contradictory to the original aims of the movement. If you're interested in this kind of discussion, we actually had an earlier discussion a few months ago, or maybe a year ago, where we talked about gaining wealth to give it away and under which circumstances that might be relevant or ethical. And actually, interestingly enough, John Wesley has a lot of interesting stuff to say about this and about how people will make this very excuse that they will just buy. That they will buy. I think it was John Wesley accused people of just saying they'll buy mansions in order to serve the poor with these mansions. I think there's some interesting connections here with the Wytham Abbey purchase. So I guess for the defense of those who were involved in the decision-making process to purchase this estate, it would be used to hold conferences and events that would further their charitable objectives. So the final crisis I'll mention here is just the FTX crisis and scandal with the sudden collapse last November and something like $9 billion in outstanding liabilities, and how this happened just overnight and just caused something like a 20-25% crash in Bitcoin prices and really shook the whole financial world and was just on the front cover of all news. So Sam Bankman-Fried, the founder or CEO of FTX, pursued this path after having worked for CEA and having been quite involved with the effective altruism movement. So I think of all these crises, my impression is that this is the one that has scarred the movement the most. It's probably the one that has the most written about it as well. And like many of these other crises, this is still very much an outstanding case with many different allegations being made and discovered. So one more honorable mention actually of crises to EA PR would be this recent publication. I think this book was what just hit the market actually in the last couple of days. And this is a book called The Good It Promises, the Harm It Does, Critical Essays on Effective Altruism. And this mostly looks at criticisms from animal advocates about the way that effective altruism has harmed animal advocacy movements. And if you're interested in this, I encourage you to check out the summaries and maybe check out the book. But particularly the emphasis here is on animals. So in terms of each and EA for Christians, our perspective. So first of all, just to restate, all these perspectives on these crises and allegations, this is just my personal impression of the situation. And I would encourage you to just research these yourself before coming to your own opinion about them. And the second thing I'd like to say is that each as an organization we really want to take steps to help Christians feel welcome and comfortable in the EA movement. And I think for many of us, that means being more involved with the EA Christian sub-community. And I think
JD,
that's, oh yeah.
there is someone in the waiting list of this call would love to
Oh
join.
yes. Well, I'll let them in 1 minute. So let me wrap up here. So yeah, we really want you all to know that you're absolutely welcome here, and please let me know if there's anything I can do to help you feel more welcome. And you can reach out to me individually for a call. You can also reach out privately, anonymously. We've had this anonymous link up for about a year and a half, and you're welcome at any time to submit something there, including any just suggestions of how we can improve. We also just want to promote a commitment to racial equality and to gender equality here in EA for Christians community. So I'm committed to doing that, and please support me in this. I hope that we can all just encourage and challenge each other to be more like Jesus, who, as I mentioned in a post earlier, though himself being God, didn't consider this as an advantage over other people, but sought to serve those who were less privileged and disadvantaged. And I think we can take that same posture when we are working in a community with people who are in various ways at risk. I don't think we can codify that in some kind of short policy or profile. I think we should instead have a culture where we are trying to support people who are potentially disadvantaged. And yeah, I'd like to talk about how we can best do that. So some discussion questions. Have the PR crises I mentioned, have they influenced your view of EA ideas at all, or the EA movement? And if so, I would love to know how. So second, do any of these crises remind you of something familiar, similar crises in the church, in church tradition, history? And what might we learn as Christians, or what might we already know as Christians who've been a part of this long-standing institution, and how to promote best practices that we can maybe provide or share with the EA movement? Otherwise, how can we be salt and light to the broader movement? And these are, as ever, just optional questions. So I encourage you to take this conversation in whatever direction you find most interesting.